Well, so every so often, I come onto this website here, and you just type in TES, T-E-S, Scotland, and you'll find yourself on said website. And it's really education related. There's a plethora of different opinion pieces, and sometimes news, etc. I get the opinion that it kind of sways, like they all do, to the progressive, quote-unquote, side of the political aisle, as opposed to being, unbiased and neutral, etc. And every so often you'll come across, the anti-racist educators, as they like to call themselves, the so-called experts, for eternal victims, the just cancers on society. Their ideology is cancer, as a cancer on society, even. And it's even more cancerous when these people with this ideology find themselves in teaching positions. So I came across this article, or opinion piece, whatever you will, a few days ago. And it really is just another example of how disengaged these people are with reality, how brainwashed, if you will, just the way that they go on. They truly believe that they're on the right side of history. They truly believe that they're fighting the good fight, and they can't see the wood for the trees. They can't seem to understand that they are the fucking problem. They are creating or trying to solve problems that don't exist. They redefine words such as racism, etc. It's the same script, just a different individual this time around. And a lot of it is for somebody that's so bold and brave, tackling racism in schools and wishes to ensure that BLM lessons are taught. The twat's anonymous. But if you go through this website, as I say, we've got all the BAME BS, recruitment systems conspire against BAME staff. I haven't read that one yet, but I might after this one. We've got equality, you just come down, and why we need to make all Black History Month last all year. You get the old one that kind of goes against the grain. I haven't read it, so I don't know what her reasoning for it is, but don't teach people about white privilege. Well, of course, it doesn't exist. If you're wanting to teach children the rights and the wrongs of the world, you want to teach children factually correct information, then tell them about white privilege. It's not the way to go, And we've got diversity, of course. Pupils need more access to BAME authors in class. Why diversity matters in our very non-diverse school. Oh, dearie me, man. And this one here, I love this one. Anti-racist action must involve curriculum reform. Of course. Of course. So, this one here. I won't be put off tackling racism through education. This teacher felt inspired after a BLM lesson, but then a parent labelled her a leftist brainwasher. I wonder why that might be. I wonder. A BLM-inspired lesson, considering BLM are Marxists, right off the bat. It could be considered that you are promoting Marxist material. It could be considered that you are parting lines perpetuated from Marxists. But what? No, of course, you're fighting a good fight. This year I was struck by the need to discuss the BLM movement and the death of George fentanyl overdose Floyd. Of course, every article, every time that these people talk, even months after the fact, they're so disengaged with reality. It's either that they're disingenuous deliberately, or they're really this disengaged with reality, because they still talk about George Floyd in the articles. Will say, on the back of the BLM movement, on the back of George Floyd. We're in fucking December now. Okay, this article came out a couple of months ago, but this is what's been going on for months and months and months and months. Even after the body cam footage was released, even after it transpired that he died of asphyxiation, which suggests a fucking overdose. Considering an overdose of fentanyl has asphyxiation under one of the symptoms type of thing. But of course, no, it's racism. They should be embarrassed of themselves. These people should be embarrassed that they are still on the back riding the coattails of a man that would have died irrespective of whether or not he was lifted by the police. And I say lifted, I mean he has to go put in the take and whatnot. But arrested, or attempted to be arrested. Anyway, I felt as a teacher it was my responsibility to tackle these subjects. I also felt that by not addressing it, when it was all over the news and social media, with my class being made up of 70% BEME children, well, this must be in Glasgow then. This must be Glasgow. I mean, this is where we're at now. Scottish schools have a class that's 70% non-Scottish. I would be letting them and their families down. I refused to be silent and therefore complicit. I knew that conversations that might make me feel uncomfortable were the ones most necessary ones, sorry. I gathered the class in a Google Meet and presented a simple PowerPoint to them. I spent time making sure that my lessons were appropriate for the age group and that it was not biased or overly political, but it's a BLM inspired lesson, so immediately it's political, immediately it's biased, because you're talking about the death of George Floyd. See what is wrong with these people? George Floyd didn't die because he was black. The BLM BS that followed after the death of George Floyd was entirely political. Fucking hell. I asked like-minded teachers to review the PowerPoint with a critical eye, and I'm lucky to have a small group of colleagues who share my social justice values. Again, that's bias. Again, that's political. You shouldn't be promoting anything social justice related. Keep that shit out of the classroom. The same as I wouldn't want any religious, Christian or Muslim or whatever it is, promoting their stuff heavily onto our class. I mean, parents should have a right for what their child learns in terms of social justice related shit, and parents should have a right to decide whether or not religious talk and religious views are pushed onto their children, but more so with a social justice crap. I mean, that is a political ideology. But they're so disconnected and disengaged with reality that they think that they're, as I said, the right side of history. It's a political ideology. Not everybody shares this worldview of social justice BS because, in my opinion, it is BS. It's just constant lefty whining. I sought to highlight the issues. What issues? What fucking issues? And inform the children of facts and statistics. The facts and statistics quite clearly showcase that the BLM movement is built on lies, with the hope that we would draw their own conclusions. That's brilliant. With the hope that they could draw their own conclusions. Now, the reason that I bring this article up, because I granted it's like some sort of opinion piece, but this is what they all say. It's the same script. So if anything else, it's just to give you a little insight as to how these people operate. Because at the end of the day, they sit there and they say this all the time. I've seen it so many times. They want to allow children to form their own conclusions, but in order for them to be able to perform their own conclusions, they need to have the case presented to them. But the case that's being presented to them is biased, is political. It's the same with climate change. There's another classic example of that. They don't tell children the other side of the argument in relation to man-made climate change. No, they tell them that climate change is world-threatening. They tell them that there's only several years left to save the planet. Then they hint or they push them towards certain solutions, and then they allow these children to form a conclusion that was already predetermined. The same shit applies here. You should not be teaching children from a biased Marxist viewpoint about poor little blacks in the beams, you know? You shouldn't be telling them skewed statistics and telling them that blacks are more likely to die in police custody, and every black that dies at the hands of the police is because of racism. When you don't sit there and you talk about the whites that are killed in police custody, oh no, that doesn't get a mention, because it's all about promoting the idea that blacks are oppressed, browns are oppressed, whites are racist, whites are oppressive, and the system is against the BAMEs. Then it gives you the justification to promote solutions to said children or said teenagers. Solutions being dismantling the system and creating a fairer, more equitable society that benefits the BAMEs and puts the whites at a disadvantage. That is what's fucking going on here, and it is toxic. It's absolutely toxic that this crap, we have teachers allowed to promote this crap in schools. I mean, where's the teaching boards when this is all going on? This is indoctrination, or attempted indoctrination. Fucking hell. The lessons raise some interesting questions, but can black people also be racist to white people? Yes, they can, but they can't in the eyes of the anti-racist so-called educators, because racism is a one-way street. Whites can be racist because according to these people, racism is privilege plus power. It's fucking stupid. Of course blacks could be racist towards white people, considering the initial definition of the word in the dictionaries of old anyway, yeah. Are all police bad? When did racism begin? And were cavemen racist? No, cavemen would have been very tribal. Absolutely tribal. And theoretically, that is what racism could boil down to. Tribalism. People prefer their own. Fucking Jesus. BLM. Confronting racism through education. The black children in the class had clearly been engaging in conversations already at home. What a shock. The white and minority ethnic children were asking The white and minority ethnic children. The whites in this classroom are minorities. You've already said that at the beginning of your little opinion piece, that 70% of the class is BAME. So the minority in said room are the whites. Same as on a global scale, actually. Whites are a minority, but, you know, we're still... whatever. We're asking questions, eager to learn more. There was a sense of outrage and a yearning for change. This seemed promising. I felt inspired by these children. I felt hope for the future. Oh, because your fucking brainwashing is rubbing off on them. This bubble of hope was burst the next day when I opened my emails to a complaint from a parent. The email began by telling me that her son does not see race and will play with anyone, and ended in her asking for him to be removed from future lessons on the topic of BLM / police brutality / white privilege. Oh, how dare she do this? How dare this parent have the audacity to pull their child out of what is quite clearly bias, political bias, leftist bullshit. Police brutality. She considered the inclusion of tweets by Donald Trump to be politically biased on my part, and she labelled me a leftist brainwasher. I felt crushed to receive this email, and my first response was to feel shame and regret over teaching the lesson in the first place. You had no right to teach this shit to children. My shame soon turned into anger. I felt angry that a parent would respond in this way to a lesson based on basic human rights. Again, so it's biased then, because it's your opinion. Basic human rights. A man overdosed on fentanyl and you took it upon yourself to teach a bunch of children about how oppressed the blacks are. You took it upon yourself to create a lesson plan predicated on Marxist beliefs, which is the BLM movement. And you have the audacity to come out the other side of that and talk about it as, I felt angry that a parent had the audacity to do this, because that's their child and you were indoctrinating or attempting to do. You are pushing your beliefs onto these children, and that is what they all do. The anti-racist educator, the thing that I've made several videos on in the past, they're the worst for it. The absolute worst. If you read through that website, it's disgusting, the stuff that they come away with. It's fucking disgusting. They treat white people as if they're in wee lab rats, you know, and then everything's deconstructed, race doesn't exist, white privilege is a thing, etc, etc, you know, whites are the oppressors, blacks are eternal victims, and they want to, and they're slowly getting their way, promoting and pushing their BS into the academia, the education system. Slowly but surely it's occurring. This is another example of it. Some twatty little teacher that's bought into this ideology and can't seem to understand that why some parent had the audacity to want their child pulled out of this crap. I wish there was more parents that would do this, but the problem is that a lot of parents don't seem to understand this is happening, because it's always sugar-coated with things such as that. Basic human rights. Oh, it's just basic human rights that we're teaching about white privilege and police brutality and why blacks are oppressed. You know, that's not basic human rights at all. It's biased, it's political bias, it's indoctrination, and above all else, it's fundamentally fucking dangerous what you're promoting. Anyway, I replied to her in detail and addressed each of her points. I quoted the General Teaching Council for Scotland, Scotland's Curriculum for Excellence, and Education Scotland, amongst others, to vindicate myself and to illustrate how problematic her protests were. And you can rattle off all your wee things there about the General Teaching Council for Scotland and Scotland's Curriculum for Excrement. You know, at the end of the day, Scotland's Curriculum for Excellence is leftist brainwashing at this point. We had very high up in the world rankings, Scottish education was world renowned. Now it's plummeting down world rankings while they spend more time talking about feelings, diversity, climate change, and above all else, feminist talking points, etc. So it's not really something that I would hold dear to me to try and use that as an excuse. Oh, well, look at the Curriculum for Excellence. I'm doing nothing wrong, but the Curriculum for Excellence is wrong. As a teacher for only a few years, I have been conditioned to bow down to parents, to fear them, to base my worth as a teacher on, and unfailingly respect parental views and opinions. That email was a real turning point for me, and although my hands were shaking as I typed, I knew that in this instance I was irrefutably on the right side of history. Why? Oh, well, I mean, it's your job to teach, but you have no right to force your political beliefs onto a child, and for you to sit there and type this shit out and act as if you're on the right side of history and this parent's in the wrong, it just showcases how out of touch you are with reality, if I'm honest. It's just, politics should not be in any way, shape or form, implemented or forced into schools, it should remain completely neutral. But more and more often now, I'm seeing all this piss about the anti-racist. The what was it? I made a video on last year or 2 years ago, and it was talking about. It was immigration resources. It was a teaching park, and they were talking about Donald Trump and Brexit as like led to like a rise in like anti-immigrant sentiment and all stuff. They're teaching children this. I mean, what the fuck has Donald Trump and Brexit got to do with learning your ABCs? This is what's happening. Teaching parks, this absolute cancerous education. It's just riddled with wankers like this. It's just filled to the brim of people like this, and they've got no place in society. Their ideology has no place in society, but these people have no fucking place in schools. They have absolutely no place in schools. I'm the right side of history. What, because some guy died of fentanyl? You know what I mean? So, just because this email was from a parent or a child in my class, they were not absolved of their outdated and privileged opinions. Oh, Jesus. I made a promise to myself that day. I vowed that for that single lesson, not to be the only one I teach about BLM, and for that email not to put me off tackling this subject again in the future. The curriculum for excellence is so wide, ambiguous at times, and open to interpretation, but that cannot be an excuse not to bring these conversations into our classrooms. When there is a discussion of curriculum rationale, I'll be the one to insist that inclusion of Scotland's involvement in colonialism and slavery, and for black history not to be pigeonholed into 1 month of the year. Our school libraries need resources to be diverse and reflect the demographics of our classroom. This is crap again about reflecting the demographics of the classroom. And if people can't see how that paves the way or paints a picture in a broader sense of what's happening in reality, because they're constantly talking about it needs to represent the demographics. So as Scotland becomes less ethnically Scottish, every single thing has to become less ethnically Scottish to represent the demographics. Then in the next breath, we're constantly told, as I keep fucking repeating, we're all one. So realistically, it should not matter if Tyrone and Abu Dhabi, etc., and Abdul and Muhammad, etc., are reading books who happen to have white children on the front, because we're all one. Or is it that we're not allowed to see ourselves as white, but you're allowed to see yourself as black, you're allowed to see yourself as brown, and therefore you're allowed to demand that you are represented, you want to see yourself? I'm thinking it's the latter there, eh? The demographics of our classrooms, and teachers need to be aware of their responsibility and their privilege. Only if they're white though, because if you're a black teacher, you don't have privilege. Of course you don't have privilege. As a new teacher, I would like more CBD opportunities and training to be given to staff on how to deal with incidents of racism, and for discussions of race to become essential to our classrooms as maths and literacy. And I'm still sick of this shit. I'm fucking sick of it. Hating this. Every article's the same. Oh, we're not talking about race now. You won't shut up about race. I was raised in school, in an all-white school, because, the Highlands of Scotland is probably the only place left in Scotland that really is relatively unscathed by diversity. Thank fuck for that one. But we never gave race a second thought. We didn't have to. We weren't taught about it. Nobody talked about it, and there was no need to. So why is it as classrooms start to become more and more diverse, as if that's supposed to be a good thing, it's progressive type of thing, all of a sudden the conversations of race become more and more prevalent? Is it not easier to assume, is the hypothetical not the case, that diversity is the problem? I'm just saying. I lived in I still kind of do, very white area. Race wasn't talked about when I was in school. Absolutely not. Never gave it a second thought. I didn't have to. Now it's becoming commonplace as everything becomes more and more less white, less ethnically Scottish. You're hammering the shit home at every opportunity possible, and complaining and whining and fucking moaning, and at the same time shitting all over our history, our culture, and us as a people in the process. It is my view, I would like for BAME children, parents and families to feel safe and understood. The reason that they might not necessarily feel safe, as anecdotal as that technically is, you fucking drama queen, is the fact that you're continuously telling BAME children, and the society is constantly, or the media and the politicians are constantly telling BAME parents and families that they're eternal victims. You're the problem, not us. It's not up to us to make them feel safer when there's nothing to be afraid of in the first place. and understood. It's my view that there is a distinct lack of primary age resources for teachers to use. And when we talk about resources again, it's politically biased resources that you're referring to. If I did not have to make up and define my own PowerPoint and I had been given resources by the school, my reply to the parent would have been much simpler. Well, because you would have been able to say that the school provided you with such resources, so then it wouldn't look like you're the one that's engaged in the political bias brainwashing. There is also need for support from senior management, but in my experience, head teachers do not want to rock the boat. Oh God, just get a grip. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. They're so disengaged with reality. They don't want to rock the boat. Now, maybe some of these head teachers don't want to conform to your shit. It is easier not to teach these subjects. What subjects? The subjects that have been crafted, meticulously crafted by people that share your worldview. It's not a concrete subject. It's not black and white. No. It's skewed, it's disingenuous, it's built on lies, and above all else, as I keep saying, it's fundamentally fucking dangerous. It's subversion. It's Marxist crap. To teach these subjects or have these uncomfortable conversations, but there is complicity in comfort and exercise of privilege, of course. We must ask ourselves who it is easier for. Who is most comfortable when these topics are ignored by schools and teachers? It certainly is not the BAME children and families. So you mean it's white people then? Yeah, of course you do. We surely cannot be getting it right for every child if we continue with a colour, culture, ethnicity blind approach and by default focus on the majority groups, which in this context would be Scottish children. Not white children, Scottish children. Scottish. Get it through your thick head. And of course, so this is what I'm talking about. They're anti-racist, but yet they want to focus so much on race. They don't like the idea of things being colourblind because we're not talking about the BAMEs. Can they not see what's... I just don't know. There was another one that I was reading there a bit of. The video's getting too long, so I'm not going to go through this one, but it's just ridiculous. You know, the lack of diversity in college leadership was laid bare. Data showed that 84.1% of senior leaders in English colleges identified as white British, while just 8.7% identified as being from BAME. Oh, that's so racist, of course. But there was one here. Why BAME equity, not inclusion, must be school's goal. You know? It's just unbelievable what they're trying to push for. All of them. They're all the same. Absolutely ridiculous. You know? Inclusion is no bad thing, but of course, this got me thinking about inclusion versus equity and how international schools can play their part in this push for system level change that we have seen across the world this year, referring of course to BLM. Inclusion is no bad thing, of course, but we need to go further than just being included and instead be considered as an equal part of the system in which we work. This is where equity comes in. Equity isn't just about giving people what they need, it is about changing the system that brought about inequity in the first place. We need to give advantages to those who have been disadvantaged and give minority groups the opportunity to have an advantage and platform in situations they never had before. It's a meritocracy for the time being, but the more diversity quotas, the more equity-driven policies you push forward, the less and less it becomes said meritocracy, and the more it begins to benefit the BAMEs. I'm so sick of this shit, you know. I really am absolutely sick of it. But this video's getting a bit too long. Well, you know, peace.